Hi, welcome to Powerhouse. Joining us today is Michele Lai, founder of Kids4Kids, a nonprofit organization.
Hi, Joyce. Thanks for having me today.
And thanks for joining. First, we could start with a quick overview of how you got to your current position.
Currently, as you said, run a nonprofit, Kids4Kids. It's 10 years this year, so we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. I consider it like my second career, second time round. Prior to that, I was always working in the corporate. So ever since I graduated, almost like 30 years ago, went up the corporate ladder and everything was fine, and then I got married, had kids. And I think that was the time then I thought, well, what gives me better meaning in terms of using my time, working in a corporate or actually doing something I feel would have more impact, in terms of like a legacy, perhaps, that's more long term. So that's how I started Kids4Kids 10 years ago. And it's all about empowering kids that, to know that they're never too young to be able to change the world, to be able to make a difference. So that's how I would say that I consider Kids4Kids as my second career. I did have a first career, happy to go into that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. Let's start with the beginning. How did you got into your first career?
Coming from a traditional Asian family, the norm would be that you go study and then you go to university, and without pausing, you would get your first job. There was nothing at that time. I would say, gap years was not common. So in my family, my parents actually immigrated from Malaysia to Australia to give us a better life. And to give a little bit of context, when I was born in Malaysia many moons ago, actually 1969, it was just after the racial riots in Malaysia. And for Chinese families, we probably wouldn't be able to go to university in Malaysia. We'll have to go abroad. So my dad decided then that to keep the family together, we would go to Australia. So that's where I did all my studies. But even though we were immigrants in Australia, we still had a very Asian kind of, in terms of towards studies, but they never throughout my studies ever pushed me into saying, hey, you have to study, you can't do this or you can't do that. They were always very willing to let me make my decisions. So for example, they might say, oh, maybe you shouldn't do your part-time waitressing because you've got your exams coming up. And my response would be, well, if I do badly, then I will stop. And I never did. So then they'll be okay. So that was kind of the relationship I had with my parents, where we could actually discuss and they would go, oh, okay. So when I fast forward, finished my high school, my dad at that time, for some reason, read somewhere that, computer science was the industry to go into. So he unenrolled me. He intervened for the first time. He unenrolled me from what I had enrolled in and said, no, we have to do this for your future. So I guess it was the first time he thought, oh gosh, need to play parent now and I'll do that. So I did go to computer science for first year. It was really not me. And in those days, they were like mainframes, things like that, so very much not me. And during that year, then I was told about marketing and I'm like, what's that, as a degree within the business. And so I did switch in the second year. Again, being from the Asian family, like, oh, you cannot take any extra time to graduate. So I'm like, don't worry, I got it. So I actually added extra load to finish my degree. In Australia, it's a 3-year degree. So finished it in 3 years. At that time, I was 19. So then when I applied for jobs, I knew myself that I wanted to work for a multinational, and I knew I wanted to work at head office. I had this thing in me that I didn't want to start somewhere and then have to work my way, in a very convoluted way. So I applied to all head offices. And at that time, growing up in Australia, if you couldn't figure that out, my Australian accent, growing up in Australia, I grew up in Perth, which is on the west. And so all the head offices were in Melbourne and Sydney. So I applied to those jobs. And I mean, I was very fortunate to be offered a job. My first job was with Toyota Australia, in Sydney. But getting that job wasn't easy in a sense that it was the first time in my life at 19 that I realized that I was different, that I was a female. And being Asian, I would say, wasn't at that time still that much of an issue for me. But it was the first time I realized that, oh my goodness, you know, I couldn't get that job because I was female. And that was my first time that I realized.
Is that the feedback they give you directly? Just like, oh, we'll think a male would do better. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, when there was a particular job, and don't ask me why, but I was applying to industries that were quite male dominated. So the one that I applied that I got to like the finalists between myself and this other person, the gas company, won't name people. In the end, I got a call from the HR person, a female, who then said off the record, but she wanted to tell me that she thought that I was deserving of the job. But in the end, they chose the guy because they felt that under crisis that, you know, he would be able to make a decision better than me.
Right.
I was like shocked. I was like, wow, you know, it was for the first time that I was told I couldn't do something because I was a woman, you know. But anyway, at that time I was still interviewing. And so the other job that came up was from Toyota. And the position I applied for, again, they said, I'm sorry, we cannot hire you. You're a female, but another department's hiring and they will take you and will come and get you a year later. And those managers that said that offered me the job did. They kept to their word. 1 year later, they came and internally transferred me. So at that time, again, you know, very oblivious 19, 20-year-old, I'm like, oh, okay, you know. I was the first non-secretarial person in Toyota. And I recall at that time, the secretaries, you know, obviously were females. And sometimes, you know, just by unconscious bias, that someone might say, oh, can you get me whatever? And they would go, sit down, Michelle, you know, you're not the secretary. But I was just, you know, it's my first job. I'm like, you know, someone's like, you know, so I'm like, okay, I'm not the secretary, but to consciously, because I just thought, well, you know, someone's asking you, why can't I just do it, right? But it was something that they, amongst even the secretaries, they really felt that I represented, you know, someone. They hoped that, you know, again, that there could be many more after me.
Do you feel like it was really hard to overcome that? Or once you recognize that trend, you just kind of, you know, for the regular work, you just kind of keep your head down, do the work and work hard and it feels the same? Yeah.
Well, you know, now that I'm much older and looking backwards, I realized that for all of us, it's really important to have someone who's like a mentor, who's there, or someone that's like almost like your champion or your coach, you know. So for me, the first break or the break was given really by the manager who believed that I was the right person, and then internally went to get, you know, to get me a job somewhere else and then get me back a year later. If they sort of went, oh, this is too difficult, oh no, you know, sure, we'll just default and just hire, you know, another person. What was interesting, because the job that I got there, the one that I moved to 1 year later, it's called product planning. Product planning and development. So I used to drive cars all the time. That's one of the job requirements. And they would say, okay, why don't you just go get a truck license? And I'll just go, okay, you know, because my I would say attitude to life, and that's always been the case till now, is that someone will say something and I wouldn't go, oh, I can't do that, or, you know, I just go, sure, you know, let's try, right? So I've got a truck license. I did think it, you know, it caused a lot of chuckle, you know, when I would drive around in my truck during my sort of truck driving classes, that there was a Asian female. At that time, I remember I had a bob hair with a headband, you know, and then just driving along, and, you know, people would just double take, looking at me, and I thought that was quite funny too.
That's pretty cool. I'd love to see a photo of that.
Yeah. So, I think, and even till today, I find it really funny that, if I go to a rental car place, by default, people would hand the keys to my husband.
Mm. Yeah.
And the funny thing is that my husband knows, that my job was at Toyota, and he'll just, oh no, she's the driver. So in terms of at Toyota, I got to design even a car that now when it's driving around, it's probably like 4 generations, evolved, but it's called the RAV4. Yeah, and even at that time, it was designed for the female market. It was during that time I would say the early 90s that there were female executives, and that this car would be something that would drive around the city, that it won't be like driving around in a mumsy car, or not a cool car, but so there was a specific target market, and that was my project, and that was super fun.
Sounds like a lot of fun and quite in the forefront of things.
That was around the early 90s, late 89, 90. Recently, I don't know whether you've watched a movie called On the Basis of Sex. It's about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so, another time, a topic for another time. But when I was watching it, I remember I was like, yes, I could relate to her. Obviously, she's a bit older, but it's like things that happened in 59, 69, 79, 89, and all the things I had to push through. And I thought, oh my goodness, that now looking back, that I had to push through the same. And I would say that today it's a bit more, I would say it's a bit more balanced, a bit more fortunate, but obviously still
still there, right? Some underlying biases is still there.
Yeah. I think Hong Kong is probably better than a lot of places. So that's why I made the move, because I felt that in Australia, your career is very much like sort of very predictable in terms of how many years of experience. And at some point, again, if I was to continue in Toyota, it's a very much a boys club kind of thing, so there is probably some limitations. So when I came to Hong Kong, because prior to coming, I looked at this place as a place where, like it would just give you anyone that works hard, and you could just have opportunities. And so your gender, your age, that's never been like, something to stop anyone, so long as you just went for it,
Right. Work hard. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you actively want to make a move, and Hong Kong is kind of the target city. What was the job that you moved into when you moved to Hong Kong?
So happened that we did a launch in Australia for a Lexus vehicle, and it was the Toyota in Hong Kong and a Lexus team and a bunch of journalists that came to Australia. So they met me, and I guess during that time, again, they thought that I was interesting because, here I am driving trucks and doing this and doing that. And I guess it's that mindset and personality that they said, if you ever wanted to come to Hong Kong, look us up. So I did, maybe 6 months later. Basically, I was moving into a familiar industry, but in a different country, right? So there was some familiarity for me. And so it's not totally out of my comfort zone, I would say. But in Hong Kong, the size of the market is actually much smaller. So 1 year of Hong Kong is like 1 month of Australia. Having studied management and strategic marketing and looking at organizations and things like that, I was very interested in the telecoms industry because it was an industry that was going from monopoly to deregulation. So I thought, okay, I want to go there. I want to be in the change as they're moving from monopoly to deregulation, so I did get a job in Hong Kong Telecom. And again, using some familiarity, they assigned me into, at that time, a vertical industry. So very similar to probably banking and some other large companies, where you would look after vertical industries. So one of my vertical industries was travel and transport. Something new challenges. And again, somehow that was the longest time I stayed in Hong Kong Telecom until I left in year 2000, my corporate career. And, I think what I really enjoyed most in there, and I think they also were able to provide me was that every 12 months, I would be given something new to do within Hong Kong Telecom. Yeah, so it was like I was moving jobs without moving jobs.
Wanted to hear your story. You mentioned you were quite an entrepreneur when you were younger. You started a company. So if you can kind of describe that.
Okay, so, as I said, every time when I'm anywhere, I always see different ways of doing things. It wasn't even working until it was going backwards. So when I was a teenager, around 15, I think I was then, and my sister just started university, and she was part of a sort of overseas Chinese organization doing social events. And they were doing it at the university in a hall, and they would, hire the DJ, get the speakers, get the lights and all that, and set it up. And then I looked at that and I thought, why are they doing it that way? Why don't they just hold it at a disco or a nightclub? It's all set up. Why are they doing this, right? And I said it to them, and they just looked at me going, what are you talking about? Yeah. And then so I thought, okay, so I made a call, and I called up a club, and I said, oh, hi. So, you're very quiet on like a Wednesday, or whatever they go, yeah. I said, so how about this? I said, you give me the venue for free. I'll bring the people in. And then you also do a split for drinks. And I thought this person must have been crazy on the phone, because it's usually 0 person on, or 5 people maybe, on a particular night. That they go, sure, nothing to lose. Right. And so then I went back to my sister and go, hey, I got this deal, right? And then she was quite sort of, her and her friend were like quite interesting, okay, let's try it out. And so I was involved and made it happen. We sold tickets and all that, and it was a huge success. And for the rest of my high school and university, okay, so I was organizing this below 18, yes. Right. But I would organize successful events, and at that time I didn't know what was marketing. So people would say, oh, that's why logically when I was studying, they said, oh, I think you should do marketing, not computer science. I go, what's that? And then when I did do marketing, I go, oh my goodness, this is what I've been doing, price, place, promotion, and all those things, right? And I was just doing it out of common sense.
Yeah. And
again, I think the way I would do it and approach it, even from pricing, was very much just, I thought, common sense, So even at some point where I would even do like to try and increase the price of a ticket, I would even organize 2 parts of it and say, okay, pay more and you get to come to the both. And sometimes people would pay and maybe not come. I thought, oh, this is great. I even can even earn more money. So I was having a great time, I would say, doing real life things when I was, still studying. And it didn't really make sense yet at high school, because, I'm studying like history and literature, biology. It wasn't really relevant. But when I was in university, I thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what the textbook says. Oh, let me go try it out, right. And I could try it out, right? And so that was very rewarding. And when I did go for all my job interviews or applications, I would write in my CV what I did, and this was one of them. And each time when I went for an interview, they didn't ask me what I studied. They would say, so tell me about your events, and I would tell them. And then they would ask me questions like, oh, and I could respond because it was real. So like a real work, I would say, of what. So I think from their point of view, and why I sort of would make it to the short list of always the finalists or get a job, was because they probably thought, okay, I don't really need to train her that much, because you already had some training.
Right. You had that
And
practical experience and ideas and all that. Yeah.
yeah. It's like beyond textbook, and so I truly believe even now that that skill set for our current generation of going to, university to getting a job, that's what sets someone apart from the other.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Doing something different and not what
Yeah.
you would do in school or even, extracurricular. It's really outside of that, right? It's just practical.
Yeah. So my largest event, even at that time, would be maybe 1,000 people on a
Wow.
single night.
It's pretty big.
So, so these days, sometimes at Kids4Kids, when they all go, "Oh my gosh, I've got to organize something for 500," I'm like, "Oh, it's okay."
I've done it when I was 15.
And I hope that the same thing for some of the 15-year-olds now. Then obviously I'm not bringing them to a nightclub, but but let's say they're organizing Powered by Youth Forum, or they're doing different things, that they would have organized an event that's a few hundred people. That then when they did go get a real job, that things don't faze them that much, because we've had some amazing last minute blow-ups, failures, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Right.
And we would just have to pivot, right, on the spot. And so usually when I brief them at the youth forum, I'll just say to them, things will go wrong today. Whatever you've rehearsed, whatever you've planned, things will go wrong. So, but the thing is, don't just stand there and get stuck. Just think about what can you do. And I said, never assume no for an answer. Never take, so if you know what you want to get done and someone tells you no, then again, find the solution.
And so how did you get into the idea of starting your nonprofit organization?
I left my corporate career in 2000, and that was intentional. I was married at that time for a few years, and we decided to start a family. So we decided that instead of two of us working and not raising our kids, we decided then that we'll focus on one career. And at that time, it was mine. Honestly, at that time, both my husband and I, we were earning the same salary and probably similar level. I don't mind, I really, I thought I've already done everything I've wanted to do, so I didn't mind. But so gave up my career, started a family, and then I guess just that, as I shared with you, my personality or my style or me, I'm very much always starting things up and looking for new ways of doing things. For me then, it's very important that having the two kids, that I would really have a better world for them to grow up in. To share a little bit, I remember when my husband said, "Oh, let's start a family." I went, "No." and it was no, because I said to him, you probably can't remember that, but I said to him, I don't want to bring them into this world where I felt the world wasn't a good world, like it wasn't a good state, right? And he goes, "Oh, I don't think about it too much, it'll be fine." And so, obviously having the kids and the joy that the kids bring, it is amazing, but still always in the back of my mind, I'm really always concerned about, well, what is the world that they're going to grow up to become, that will look like. So when the kids were young, I would always tell them, like, just so that they're mindful about, people outside, so community and more about some bigger issues, even though they were at a young age, I would try to, simplify what I was saying to them. But I would tell them about stories about like other kids who weren't as lucky as them, that, didn't have schools to go to, didn't have books to read and things like that. And, I didn't scare them. I was just very sort of in a storytelling way would say that. And my son then at that time turning 5 said, "Okay, mommy, can we do something for these kids? Can we give them books, can we help them go to school, can I sell some of my things? I don't need this. That time that was just an idea where I just thought, okay, and then I just, honestly, I didn't realize the impact of what I said had on him. So probably like in the 9th month, of his idea, I found a place. It was an open market in Port Phillip. They didn't at that time have anyone selling secondhand kid stuff, but we pitched it to them, and then they went, sure, so we called it Jack's Treasure Box. And so I said, hey, I found you a place, so he was very excited. Then he said, oh, let's, put the things together and all that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I was thinking, why can't you just go to bed and I'll do it all, be faster? But then I went, oh, yay, let's do it. So we priced things, we took photos, we did everything. And I mean, I was really exhausted, like thinking, it's easier if I did it myself, right? But I took the effort to involve him.
Yeah.
So I did say to my helper, leading up to that open market, look, hey, can you just come along, because he might run off on his little scooter to play. And she goes, sure. She came along, but actually he didn't move from the stall that day. The whole day he was there, very engaged, telling customers, oh, this Thomas goes with that, this goes, and he would come up with his own pricing, and he was engaged the whole day. The magic that happened was that was like a Sunday market. The next day he went to his school, and he couldn't stop telling his teacher, his friends about what he did, yesterday. Right. And obviously he was like probably rambling and, not coherently. So he came home that day and said, my teacher said I can do a show and tell. Can you help me? And he drew these little pictures, stapled a book. And can you write the words to why we did that and, what we did? I was like, okay. So I did that. and he did do the show and tell. And I realized then that, what he did by being engaged, by not just by doing and being invested, and he actually remembered it much better and longer. And that's in a way sort of like how Kids4Kids, I would say that, using that of my child, I thought, hey, hang on a minute, maybe we could do more of that. And friends also sort of saw, friends around sort of said, oh, wow, next time you do something, can you bring my child, or can we do, so I think, it was something that we realized that if the child was, it doesn't even have to be the child, I think even adults, if you do it, you learn by doing, right? Yep. And I think that kind of real life learning is far more greater than textbook learning that goes in one ear and out the other. So you're doing practical practice. And I feel also when you're starting young, fear of trying is much less. A lot of times that when we become adults, we lose that sort of innocence of, I can do anything, I can fly, I can,
you just be way too practical, right?
We sort of box ourselves into a box, and so, and I feel that if we allow them this opportunity to try young, and just to, be guiding them, not doing it for them, that I realized that that kind of learning, and then the next time to repeat it, and obviously the next time you repeat, you don't repeat the same mistakes, right? So from that, there's some learning, and that's what we're doing now for not, obviously I've cookie cut it to many students that take part in Kids4Kids that have gone through this kind of learning experience, being responsible. So 10 years on, we've had some youth that have gone through, graduated, are now working. And recently we reached out to them to ask them, and when they reflected, I mean, they're only like mid-20s. It's not like they're super old. Okay, they're only in their mid, but reflecting to when they were 15, 10 years before, they just said, look, all those kind of learnings that we did through Kids4Kids, we use that now in our everyday, work or things like that, so very, very proud that they could be 25. It works. And if then we can equip them with the skills to be always problem solving, looking ahead of what can they do better to help. I think this would be the skills that they need or anyone needs.
Absolutely.
For the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are some of the things sometimes you just don't get from straight up from school, right? Like thinking back as well, it's like some of the things you start working and like, what are the skills I wish I could have learned, either in school or outside of school. Um, that's more practical in that sense and help you really solve problems, right? While you face new things, because you're not going to learn every situation in school. So how are you going to navigate through it? So that's great. And that's amazing that you see that with, students coming back and giving positive, positive memories of being at Kids4Kids. You said it's this year's 10th year. And from, starting it, inspiration with Shaq, your son, and setting it up. What are the bigger challenges and how did you overcome that and pivot from that?
Starting an NGO is no different from starting a startup for profit. Mm-hmm. The difference is that one, hopefully you might earn some money, but the other one, it's really, doing good for the community. It's a social good, right? That means that as we're growing, we do need to obviously grow organizationally to hire people. It can't just be volunteers. I think, again, very early on in Kids4Kids, I remember going to corporate to actually ask for funding. And then the corporate said, okay, so what's all your operating expenses annually? And I told them how little it was and that I wasn't paid. And then we had this fresh graduate, and that was our only person, staff, so we run really low. And then that person said, okay, so you're asking for 3 times what you're spending annually. So firstly, how are you going to spend it all if you were asking for three times more? Their question. And secondly, which is the one that really made me sort of like sit up, is that the person said, well, what is your organization structure? We're a corporate, so if we gave you the money you're asking for, which is 3 times of your annual OPEX, then what happens if you're not there tomorrow? How is it going to survive if you're not there? I couldn't answer that question because I first went in really proud, like, look at us, lean and mean, all this, right? And so I went, yes. so then I went away and made a conscious effort. And even from the beginning of Kids4Kids, we had a board. And the board's been wonderful, many of whom are still in our board today. So that's really good testament to Kids4Kids, and our board being very involved. They're also, rolling up their sleeves, would do things. But again, it's a board, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't, again, still go to ask for funding to say, oh yeah, our board's like, wonderful and all that. But where is that organization structure of, I guess having people that actually did the job, even if I wasn't there or the board weren't there. So I consciously then, together with the board, we had to then start hiring, as our finances grew, to hire and put salaried people into the organization. Trying to find, as the organization grows, a leader for your organization that shares the same vision and is very aligned and can sort of take the organization forward. That has been, I would say, the biggest challenge. Mm-hmm. So throughout Kids4Kids 10 years, we've had a few executive directors. So that's what we call the leader of the organization that handles the management, operations, and everything. And what, I guess there was the time when we had to make a very difficult decision, and the person was actually high performing. But towards, I would say, the end of, whatever reason, changes, they changed their strategic, I would say, alignment to the organization. And from the board, we're like, oh, but it works and everything's fine. Let's just turn a blind eye. It's okay. Kind of, because being an NGO, it's really difficult to find good people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And being an NGO, we feel that we already don't pay, whatever the competitive commercial salary, that we should be a little bit more, understanding and things like that. Biggest wake-up call was that, well, we are accountable to our donors and the funders and all, we should manage ourselves just as if we were a business. We try to be understanding, but if the person is not now correct for the organization, then we should really have done something about it. So what happened, because when the person was not, like I said, really embodying or being engaged in the organization, that sort of negative vibe spread.
Right.
So it's a good lesson learned now that if something's really not right at the, sort of at the front of the ship, the captain,
Yep.
right? We really need to address it like quite decisively.
Right.
So at that time, I would say the board actually sort of, we were very aligned. Like I said, our board, they're still from day one. They're still the same board members. The only ones that have moved on is only because they've left the country, left Hong Kong. So we've then added new people. So we were still aligned. And I guess we then collectively made the decision that that's not the right leader to lead our organization. So I think the pivoting thing would be that the board governance to the board cohesiveness, how we interact. I stress again, it's really important. And I'm very fortunate to have a wonderfully cohesive board. And, to really then say, no, we're going to do this and we'll step in, and because it's not aligned, because they're looking again at further down the track, not just the immediate. So, and everyone's invested in Kids4Kids vision rather than personal interest, so I think that's really.
What are some of the next steps or next project coming up for Kids4Kids?
We're quite excited that now in our 10 years, we've managed to reach really a diverse group of people within the community. So we work with kids in primary school to secondary school. When I say we work with, we do a lot of outreach into the low resource schools in Hong Kong by giving the students a different way of even, let's say, writing stories, so we have like story writing workshops where traditionally they'll just do their spelling tests and, all the things that they have to do. But what we introduce is like more imagination and creativity. And that has been something that we sort of provide to the primary school that we serve. And for the secondary schools, we're trying to now, going forward to your question, what are we doing is that we've seen that when we work with a school, a partner school, for a long time, and meaning over a sustained few years, and work deeper with the schools, so we consider them as a partner school, then that relationship and rapport and trust is built. And when you have that within the teacher or the headmaster, and then you see also the transformation with the students that we work with, because they go through our different programs in youth. We first outreach in what we call a Powered by Service, 3 workshops that help them realize who they are, what they're good at, and then how could they activate that into helping solve a community problem. So trying to sort of help them to think about beyond me to then meet we, because, being part of the community. So we do that. And then we have an annual youth forum. Then we invite them there, and then they start to ideate ideas, how to, help help and do something with what they enjoy or good at. And then we move them along, and we found that the students that maybe over 3 years that have gone through different stages of our programs, we've seen their confidence, self-esteem, being responsible. I hear a lot when we work with the low resource schools that a lot of students will just decide, I might show up today. Oh, maybe I won't wake up and go to school today. And, the sense of responsibility is very low. And definitely their self-esteem, their confidence. A lot of times they feel that, okay, this is my life and this is it. This is my life, and I'll either not finish school and I'll just go to work, or I might finish school, but again, don't know,
Right.
what the future holds. And so you'll meet a lot of students that really are not very happy. They can't seem to see what is the future or where is the future. So when we sort of work with them, and what we have seen is that when we reframe that mindset to then go, well, you don't have to just take what it is, then how could you then pivot, yourself with your mindset and all that, and to take that responsibility of yourself, rather than say, oh, it's somebody else's problem, or I don't know, just blame other people, or So we've seen that change the teachers, like I said, the headmaster. So we've seen this in a few of the schools that we work with. And so again, having documented that with our 10 years of history, now we're like, okay, how can I then replicate this so that we could have more partner schools that believe in Kids4Kids, so that they will share that 3 years journey, with us, some schools still would say to us, okay, what can I expect after the workshop? Will they be able to know their career, and will they be able to, do this better and all that? And we're like, okay, that's the wrong kind of thinking. And we're like, you need a bit of a longer term, and it's really what we're developing is like the inside out, because you might not be able to see it yet, but it will come out. That is one of the best things I could gift the youth that we work with, the kids that we work with.
I want to ask last question. Any additional advice you'd like to give our audience?
I think the thing is to know, what the end game is, and then go for it, and don't be afraid to try, don't be afraid to ask. And there will be little setbacks, but if you know what you want, then stay focused, but the most important thing, I think, don't be afraid to try. And because I was never afraid to try, as you can see or hear from my sharing, and I seldom took no for an answer. I wouldn't say took no, but even using the disco, that when I started, when I came up with the idea, when my sister sort of looked at me, with a friend going, what are you talking about? I didn't just go, oh, okay, then, give up the idea. I just went, well, let me go find out. And, and who knows, maybe it wouldn't have been possible, but without trying or without asking, you wouldn't know.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce, for having me.